A couple stories, Jason, that we want to talk with you about. One has to do with a French branch of HSBC closing a bank account maintained by disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. That was back in 2007. We're going to get to that in a minute. But what I want to start with is the FBI police guarding the facility that houses the Epstein files, because you go into this in your FOIA Files newsletter, the most recent edition out this morning. And there's this like internet sort of Reddit element to this as well. What did you find through FOIA?
Sure. So this actually has this is just through reporting. Let's just say through my FOIA reporting.
Okay.
What I found is that there were threats, or at least that's how the FBI interpreted it, right? The tensions are really high around the Epstein files. And what happened was, right before Congress passed legislation compelling the Justice Department to release the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, was interviewed on a cable news program, and he said that he has it from a pretty good source that the files are being scrubbed of any Republican names in Winchester. Winchester happens to be the city where the FBI's main records processing facility is located. That's actually where if you file a FOIA request, those are the folks there that would process it over there. So what happened next is this kind of took off on social media, and commenters started to, get a little riled up about it and made suggestions of, we should perhaps protest in front of this facility. There was some comments that perhaps we should take it to the next level, whatever the next level is. It doesn't rise to the level of some of the more threatening comments that we've seen and that I've certainly reported on as it relates to federal judges, personnel at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or even FBI officials in years past. But it was enough to put the FBI on edge a bit and deploy FBI police. And FBI police are these are uniformed officers who generally guard and patrol, if you will, the main headquarters in D.C. So they were sent up to this facility in Winchester, and also to guard and watch over personnel and staff. And so this is where the Epstein files earlier this year were processed. By the way, I should note that the files are digitized. So there's some physical evidence there. There is some paper there, but the documents themselves are digitized and they're on servers. But as you can imagine, there's been over the past week, and we discussed this last week. There's such so much intensity around the Epstein files in general.
It's interesting too, and I gotta say, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but sometimes I play one on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.
Oh, I would hope not.
Jason,
you don't. To be fair,
what is to prevent someone from just erasing all these files? Like, what's the guarantee that this stuff doesn't just poof disappear?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of, the record keeping system there, but I do know that there's backups of it. I mean, I think that it would be very difficult to purge this from a server, these materials. There's multiple different copies going around. I mean, when this was being processed earlier this year, before the Justice Department and FBI said we're not going to release anything, they went through the motions of reviewing and redacting these records, right? And then they sent a copy over to Pam Bondi at the Justice Department, which is where it currently sits, a copy of it. these folks at the FBI, and there were many FOIA staff, Freedom of Information Act staff, who were tasked with reviewing these records along with special agents and applying the redactions. They haven't received any new directive since this legislation was passed. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed to go in and reprocess these records. So, they could be released at any time. We do know that it's that the bill calls for it to be released within 30 days. But as far as it disappearing these records, I mean, I think that would be really, really tough.
Sorry, I told you. I apologized ahead of time.
It's okay.
But I just do wonder because
I like the question. Good
and
question.
Carol, I think a lot of people have that question too. I mean, the redactions too is a part of this. Hey, before we let you go, Jason, I do want to give you some time to really give us the latest on this HSBC story. A French branch of HSBC closed a bank account maintained by Jeffrey Epstein. That was back in 2007. Compliance officers flagged transactions. So what did you and the team find here?
So this is the latest in our ongoing series based on these emails and other documents that we exclusively obtained from Jeffrey Epstein's personal Yahoo account. And what we found is that back in 2007, HSBC in France closed an account that Jeffrey Epstein had open for just a year. They didn't give any reason. Our reporting found that it was due to suspicious activity. They flagged transactions that were tied to a modeling agent that Epstein was doing business with. It was connected to some young women. The transactions bore the hallmarks of money laundering and other financial crimes. What's really notable here is that it is HSBC. Years later, HSBC, I'm sure as listeners are aware, they were, pled guilty to. Excuse me. Let me take that back. They entered into a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice over anti-money laundering activities. So it was really noteworthy that it was HSBC that closed his account. And what's also really important is that it's the only known instance of a major bank closing one of Jeffrey Epstein's accounts before he pleaded guilty to sex offenses in Florida. So we go into detail about what was happening also behind the scenes, drawing from these emails and how they were trying to figure out. That means Jeffrey Epstein and his attorneys were trying to figure out why the bank closed the account. The bank never gave any reason for it. So it's an important look into following the money, and following the money has become a real, a real thread that lawmakers are now pulling on to try and determine what the banks knew, when they knew it, and how they may have helped finance, his sex trafficking operation. At least that is what lawmakers have accused the banks of doing.